Hello there, everyone, and welcome once again to our wonderful pod where pop culture meets PR. On this episode, listeners, Erica Kirk. Need I say more? Well, we are going to say more. Jackie and I are going to say more because we decided that on this episode, we would be taking a bit of a deep dive into the latest developments and what's going on with Erica Kirk. Because, Jackie, before we went live, you said, I've got some theories. I've been following a few other theories, and I want to take a big look to Erica Kirk. What are you thinking?
So, for those of you who aren't really up to date with Erica Kirk, she is the CEO of a company called Turning Point USA. Now, Turning Point USA was set up by Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was seen as a conservative, visionary, conservative soothsayer, basically. He was the man that was going out and speaking to the youth of America. And he was really sweeping a lot of young people up in an enthusiasm for conservatism. And this went on great parallel lines with the whole evolution of MAGA. And Charlie Kirk, obviously, because of deeply held political beliefs, he was quite a divisive character. And unfortunately and tragically, he was assassinated on the 10th of September last year. Up until that time, Erica Kirk wasn't really well known at all. Indeed, people at Turning Point USA have said that they never really saw much of her. She maybe would be at some events or an annual event or so, but she wasn't really somebody that was front and center with Charlie at the lean end of Turning Point and the administrative end and the organizational end. They just didn't have any great impression of her other than she was Charlie's wife. But interestingly, within literally a matter of days of Charlie Kirk being assassinated, Erica Kirk is front and center. Not just even a matter of days, like literally 2 days later, she is pulled together enough to be able to stand and make a speech. So the 10th of September, Charlie Kirk is killed. The 11th of December, Air Force Two arrives in Arizona, bringing Charlie Kirk's body back from Utah, where he was killed. Arizona, where Charlie and Erica lived with their 2 children, 1 and 3. And she is seen leaving the Air Force Two with the Vice President, J.D. Vance, and his wife, Usha, and being videoed over the casket of Charlie Kirk, being seen to whisper, "I love you," kissing his hands. You're exposed to everything, basically. And by the 12th of September, she is making statements like, and I'll just read from my notes here, about the fact that his comeback tour, which he was doing, he said that the American comeback tour will continue. It will be greater than ever. If you thought my husband's mission was powerful before, you have no idea. The cries of this widow will echo round the world like a battle cry. Bear in mind, this is a woman who has very little exposure. She is not the spokesperson for Turning Point, but by the 12th of September, she has that great ability to defeat her grief, although she did dab her tears away, dabbed very well. Sorry, that's my sarcasm's coming out there and I shouldn't really do it. But if anybody looking at this woman, it was a shock. It was a surprise. You couldn't actually put yourself in her shoes because you couldn't imagine yourself having the ability. This was Superwoman. Basically, you're seeing Super Widow up there, showing all us mere mortals how a real woman can take on the great mantle and be able to speak. Within a few days, she is then pronounced CEO of this very large organization, hundreds of employees, millions of revenue. And they run a memorial service and a funeral on the 21st of September. This is now 11 days later, when she does this at a big stadium in Arizona, hundreds of thousands of people, basically. And she comes out like, it's like a Super Bowl. The glitter, the glam, the people who are speaking there. She had President Trump there. I mean, this is an epic production, which is stunning that they're able to put together something quite so enormous from, I've said it before on podcasts before, health and safety, just being able to get licenses. How did they get the stadium? I mean, how do you rent a stadium? Why weren't there any sporting events going on? So
Such short notice as well, like literally within a few days. It's like, we'll have that stadium. Extraordinary, wasn't it? Extraordinary.
indeed, indeed. Then 3 weeks later, there's another huge event where Trump honors Charlie with the Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously. Then things start to unravel a little bit for Erica. And this is what I wanted to examine, because if you just sort of step back and look at it from the lens of any normal person just absorbing this, we are hit on our television screens with widows from all over the world at the moment. We're seeing conflicts in Ukraine, in Palestine, in Iran. We're seeing real people being widowed. We're seeing the crushing tears of a widow. We're seeing these people all the time. And putting Erica Kirk next to another woman who has suffered the same loss, exactly the same loss, their husband killed, I just find it very difficult to understand how she has been able to do this. Now, she was, right? And I could accept all of that. And I think everybody could accept all of that because, as she says, everybody grieves in a different way. And I can take that. But in the few months that she has had to take on this new role, take on this new position, her communications, and this is what we are here to examine, her PR and her communications have been, I think, atrocious. Absolutely atrocious. There is no strategy. There's no thought of her audience groups. There's no thought of the different publics that she has to satisfy. It is all incredibly self-serving and it is all introspective. It's all about turning point. And it is not about the turning point that Charlie was leaving behind. This is a new turning point, and there is an absolute credibility gap that has been building and widening, and it's turned into a chasm of a credibility gap. And there are many reasons why, but the first begins with strategy and positioning.
Do you think, and apologies, this is quite pointed, but I'm gonna go in here. Do you think that credibility gap, whilst not as wide as we see now, was potentially always there, but we just didn't see it as clearly because of the shock factor of everything you've just described? Within a few days, she was Superwoman, she was Super Widow. So actually, that was the kind of immediate strategy, was actually play on the fact that she's just hyper visible and these events are extreme and enormous and, really glitzy, and there's fireworks and there's sold out stadiums and it's all happened very, very quickly. Certain people were blinded when it came to full on analysis of this whole situation by that shock factor. It just didn't sit with us. Do you think she's always been playing catch up, or is this a recent phenomenon? Is this credibility gap that you've mentioned a recent phenomenon because of decisions she's made and strategies she's employed recently?
I think everyone was in shock. So I think when you have a public in shock, when you have an audience in shock, at first they're going to accept the presentation that they're given. They're going to just absorb what is happening, what's coming out. And because of the alliances that came to support her, like JD Vance, like President Trump, having her in those kind of big ticket scenes didn't seem so out of place immediately because Charlie Kirk was propelled into this great political leader of our time. It was Martin Luther King-esque. It was that level of reverberation across the United States of a John F. Kennedy slaying or of a Martin Luther King slaying. It was perceived and televised and broadcast as that level of an event. So the accompanying surrounding hoo-ha that went with her didn't at first seem out of place. And you could almost forgive her for having to be swept up within all of that. And I think that's pretty much where people stood. And I remember listening to one of her greatest critics, Candace Owens, who just basically said, I was grieving. Candace Owens is a very good friend of Charlie Kirk's. And she said, I was grieving and I couldn't really take it all in. I mean, it just wasn't real. Nothing seemed real. So that I don't think that credibility chasm started right then, but I think it was the good lead into where things were going to go next. And if there was a strategy employed, and I think we speculated at the time this was all happening, how can you strategize for grief? How can you do a comm strategy around death, around grief, around a widow? How can you do that? Well, you can and you have to in many circumstances. CEOs die. Life has to go on. Corporations have to continue to exist. So it is an interesting case study to look at it from that perspective. And what is more, this was not a small organization. This was a large organization with a very large marketing team, with a very large comms team led by this chap, Andrew Colvett. Now, you would think that they could have taken a step back. And I think I said at the time, this would have been the perfect time after the immediate impetus of the situation had sort of dispelled a bit. That would have been the right time to bring in a senior individual who could run the organization, take over the mantle of the CEO from an administrative point of view, check all the people were fine, check everything was, running okay, find out what needed to be done. But none of that really happened. And to me, that would be the most logical and, dare I say, normal state of affairs with a large organization and these kinds of organizations, they're not just got one person sitting on high and saying, this is what I dictate. There are boards involved in an organization as big as Turning Point. So you'd have got your board of directors, your board of advisors, you'd have the people within already running the company. Charlie himself said he wasn't doing everything within Turning Point. So there would be an opportunity to do that.
Stop right there, listeners. We just wanted to take this opportunity to say we absolutely love recording this content for you. So wherever you are getting this podcast, please do like, subscribe, follow. It really would mean the world to us. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of this episode. You've just hit something there right at the end of that point, which I'm really keen to actually get a bit more of a take on, if you don't mind. You mentioned it right at the top of this episode. You said the strategy that Erika Kirk is now employing, which is where she's maybe getting a little bit found out and things are starting to close in, is because she's grounding everything in a turning point that we don't recognize from its original etymology. We don't recognize this new revamped 2026 turning point. What did you mean by that? Is that something that you would potentially, as an analyst yourself, a PR analyst, we're not critical, but we're just obviously offering analysis here. She needs her own strategy, right? She needs an Erika Kirk comm strategy, but it's all grounded in Turning Point. I'm just keen to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Very good question. The problem that you have with any organization that is led by a charismatic individual such as Charlie Kirk is that the value set that you see is very much aligned with what that person is exposing. So you have one problem there, which is he was, to everybody outside, the organization. But when Erika Kirk came in and started bringing a lot more of Christianity and the Christian faith in, but still sort of mixing the messages with Zionist messages and with, for example, observing the Sabbath on a Saturday and not on a Sunday, which is the Christian way of doing things. She started sort of mixing messages, mixing the way that Turning Point would normally talk about itself and focusing very heavily on religion. Lots of scripture was quoted. And at the same time, becoming highly, highly commercial. I mean, when Charlie Kirk died, the influx of donations were substantial, and I'm talking hundreds of millions. It was incredible, the amount of money that was coming in terms of donations. And as her tenure as CEO went on, things started to leak out of the organization, because it's all very well for me to look at Turning Point outside and see a different mixed message and think, that isn't quite the same as what I was seeing before. But it's very, very different when you have hundreds of people who have been following a leader like Charlie Kirk, seeing everything through a very different lens, a very commercial lens. And there was a really interesting Zoom recording of a woman who by that stage was not even grieving maybe a month or so. I don't know the exact timelines, but I would say, you're looking at 6 to 8 weeks, and this Zoom recording comes out and she's talking about merch sales and how excited she is about how much money they're making. And she kind of catches herself and says, it seems weird for me to say I'm excited, but I'm excited. Charlie would be dancing in heaven. And it's kind of like, what the actual is going on here? And then there's, things like this talking about her family. And she messages Turning Point like a family. Don't come after my family, because all these conspiracy theories started at the same time. And people like Candace Owens were pointing the finger at Turning Point USA and saying there were people in Turning Point USA that looked like they betrayed Charlie. And Erica Kirk was saying, this is my family. You don't go up against my family. And then a few weeks later, she's letting go of 40 of them because she doesn't trust them, because she heard a rumor from an Uber driver. One of them was let go because an Uber driver told somebody else that he'd heard some negative things about her. So it's just like there was a lot of conflict going on in terms of internal messaging and the way that the people were feeling inside the organization as well. So there was a lot of cracks appearing, let's say, in the whole machine. And instead of coming in as a unifying character, which is essentially what was positioned to everybody, she actually became a very divisive character.
Actually, it wasn't just that it was positioned, and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but it wasn't just that it was positioned like that when she ascended to the role of CEO after the event of Charlie Kirk's assassination. These are values that were being exposed that we could read into before any of this happened. And I'll explain what I mean by that. You talk about her being now quite a divisive figure, potentially at the heart of Turning Point, and how some of the decisions, and actually what I'm reading there and some of the research I've done myself as well, and some of the theories being put out there, is like this kind of cutthroat ruthlessness when it comes to sort of people being removed and sort of various, sort of decisions being made. That's never who she was before any of this happened, because who she was forced at us. The narrative was that she was a stay-at-home wife and mum. It's just jarring, isn't it? I find the whole thing very unusual. I mean, is that also where...
It's very odd, isn't it? Because the family values were really at the heart of a lot of what Charlie was preaching to everybody. He thought it was a joy and an honor for women to be able to stay at home and bring up their children. And Erika Kirk, very happily played that role. But she seemed to be more happy to play a leader role. And next thing you know, she's rewritten a script that the Turning Point employees or the Turning Point donors and fans had been played out on podcasts. And, there's evidence of Charlie and Erika talking to each other about a woman's role. I mean, there was no consistency. And this is why we talk about the chasm starting to widen, because you don't see a consistency in messaging coming through from the original leadership of Charlie and then being transferred over to the new leadership of Erika. If she was supposed to be there to bridge that gap, to create that consistency, she's done exactly the opposite of that, because her messaging and the way she has run the operation, if she is indeed in charge of it, then, it counters. It jars, as you said, a really good word. It jars against what they said they were all about. And she personally is incredibly inconsistent with, let's say, little things like the words she says. And she's been accused by Candace Owens of downright lying. And Candace has gone through, on her podcast, which we will reference in our notes, has gone through a list of lies. She did a whole podcast just running through a list of lies that were told to her by Erika Kirk to her face. So, and this has been a really interesting one. So just back to the timeline. So around about the 12th of December, so we're talking about 2 months after Charlie Kirk's tragic assassination, Erika Kirk, there's rumblings going on. There's lots of conspiracy theories happening. Candace Owens is trying to find out who really killed Charlie Kirk because she didn't believe it was Tyler Robinson, who's been this young schoolboy who's been accused of having these amazing shotgun skills to fire a gun that very experienced hunter would have a problem hitting a shot. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. We're not going to get into the Charlie Kirk conspiracy theories, but Candace Owens absolutely believes that Tyler Robinson did not shoot Charlie Kirk, that something else happened. And the more you delve into all that side of things, the more convincing that becomes. But I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole now. But I'm going to talk about the media and how Erika handled the media in the face of all of that undercurrent and bubbling up of stuff. She was really defensive. Now, when people get defensive, they go on the attack, and it is so obvious. And again, if you are a communication strategist, even a half decent comms person would have told her to button it and just stand back and let all this go on and just rise above. But she got into the ring and was punching back. It was just a gossip fest. It was a tea fest. Everybody loved all of this. And it turned into a proper fight out with Candace and Erika Kirk. Erika Kirk goes on a CBS show with a journalist, in inverted commas, called Barry Weiss, and comes out with her almost iconic statement now. Barry Weiss is going, look, Candace Owens is making all this money off clicks, and she's making loads of money off the back of your husband's assassination because of all the clicks that she's generating because of her very controversial statements. Barry, you're not mentioning the 150 million that's just poured into Turning Point, by the way. Anyway, so Candace is making all these. What are you going to say about that? And Erica's just like, just stop, glaring eyes. And it was just so defensive and so igniting of debate that she just gave fire. She poured petrol onto the fire of all of this and let it blow up into a great big fireball. What is more, she then goes and meets up with Candace Owens in a very publicly promoted meeting of the two women in Charlie's life, and they have a 4.5-hour discussion, of which Erika said it was very productive, and all Candace said was it was a discussion they should have had a long time ago. Again, more fuel onto that fire. And while all this is happening, how does Erika present herself? Not of the grieving mum of 2 children under 3 years old. She looks immaculate. She's coming out onto stage with fireworks, with her hair done perfectly and the most amazing jewels bedecked in gold rings. She looks like she's just won a big poker tournament in Vegas. And, she's come out dripping in gold, and she looks like some kind of a rock star. She doesn't present herself as a widow. Now, anybody who's gone through any grief finds it very hard to even just apply makeup, let alone have this big, black, beautifully designed eyes that she uses very forcefully. And any woman knows that if you're crying all the time with makeup, it doesn't even matter if it's waterproof, it will come off. But she's dabbing things beautifully, looking like a rock star. The whole thing was presented, positioned, actually actioned in an incredible way. That's the best use of the word incredible. No credibility behind how she looked, what she was saying, what she represented. She's literally opening herself up to the shark pool that, there's the minute Candace Owens bit her, she started to bleed, and it became an absolute feeding frenzy.
Your comments make this podcast what it is, so please do keep those coming in. We are now putting some of our episodes on Substack, so please do get along to that platform and subscribe. It's free, and we would absolutely love you to visit us there and see all the brilliant content we are putting on our Substack. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of this episode. We've said before, consistency and authenticity go hand in hand here, right? You've spoken about the wild inconsistencies here. Are we seeing an example here of someone who can see the shark circling, and they're getting closer and closer as the days go on, and it's just apologies here for being a bit colloquial and a bit out there, throwing enough stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. And that's causing her a massive problem, because there is an argument, and I don't want to go too overt here, there is an argument that even if a strategy isn't the right one, if you apply it consistently enough, at least you've got that. At least people can say the strategy's not great, but at least they're consistent. That's quite often something that we say and we analyze about certain people. There's no consistency here. And not only is there no consistency, some of the stuff she's trying, I mean, I'm pleased you brought up the chronology of just stop, but then she didn't just stop, but then she went and had a really, really public private meeting with Candace Owens. And then she said it went well, but then a few weeks later, she sort of said, well, it could have gone better. And it was really publicly communicated that it was 4.5 hours, but I don't know what they could have spoken about for 4.5 hours. Do you see what I mean? It's like, it's throwing enough at the wall and seeing what sticks, and nothing sticking, is it? It's just all dropping to the floor.
No, and the more this has just carried on, the worse it has become for her. There is no real going back now for her. She has backed herself into a very public corner. She has a group of people around her, and we often talk about who you keep company with, don't we? And who are your advisors? And she seemingly has this group of people around her that are propping her up, but really all they're doing is they're holding her up to the wolves all the time. She has not got the devotion and loyalty of her own employees because of the moves that they've made against people who are working 20-hour days to get this stadium ready for the memorial, being cast out. One woman and her fiance were sacked because of this Uber driver rumor. There was some very brutal sackings, and they weren't told why. They weren't actually given that reason for their sackings. They just were told that they weren't part of the plan anymore. That is so hard for somebody who sat there and listened to Erika Kirk getting super excited about merchandise sales and donation revenue. They're not broke. It wasn't that they couldn't afford the employees that they sacked. And you would think that you were looking at a group of people in grief who are grieving their boss, who they all were very devoted to. The Turning Point was not your normal kind of company. It was on a mission. These people were all believing in Charlie's mission. They believed in Charlie. There was a very passionate group of people who were abandoned. So she's absolutely laid herself open for criticism from the people she employed, from people who previously believed in the Turning Point message, who aren't necessarily sure of what the message is now. It's still a big organization. It still has a lot of money. It still has a lot of employees. But I think that they will need to really sit back and look at themselves and assess whether Erika Kirk is the right person to take that organization forward.
And yet, she's still there. She's still at the top of Turning Point USA. But as we have mentioned, mistakes have been made along the way. What should Erika Kirk have done? What should she have done leading up to this point? Because it feels like you have some very, very strong opinions on certain things you could have done quite differently.
I do, Lyle, because whether I agree with her politics, it doesn't really matter what I think of anybody or their politics or anything like that. When I look at a comm situation, I want it to go well. And this, to me, was something that would have been so elegantly done if she had just taken herself away right at the beginning from this situation. I do feel to a certain extent that she is surrounded by some snakes who push her forward into this situation. I did say just now, I feel like a lot of the people she's surrounded with propel her into that shark pool. If she hadn't had that kind of level of support around her, I would have advocated that she should just grieve. First off, just do what most people do. I have almost a weird feeling that she was influenced by Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, There are these iconic pictures of Jackie getting back on the plane on Air Force One, being there when, was it Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn in, still in the same suit that she was wearing. I just got those sort of that flavor of this is what they group of them were trying to do with Erica. And I don't think I was the only person that sort of got that tone. What I would have liked to see was her being like any other woman in that situation, being a mother, making some very, very clear statements, telling people how things were, what was going to happen, not being front and center straight away, being there, being present. If you feel like you have to represent your husband, keep his mission going, you can do that in a much less showy and Vegas style way about it. She could have taken a much more low-key, humble approach, and she would have got exactly the same response and reaction if she had not been so Elvis Presley about it all. But she took this showbiz, flash, all the electrics, all the hype, all the glitz, the glamour, the ticker tape, the fireworks. That was happening on stage when she was there. And it was highly, highly inappropriate. Decisions like having Charlie Kirk's, the canopy that he was under when he was shot, having that for people to take selfies at AmFest, which was their festival for TPUSA. Just really, really weird and odd decisions. I don't think she made all of them. I think if she had taken herself away from all of that, there might have been a lot less criticism of her and of the organization. But because of the way they did everything, and the way she has come across as very brash, very styled, very unreal, very unbelievable, that sort of dampened down what she must be feeling in terms of grief, real grief. And it's made people question whether she's grieving. And you cannot do that. You can be honest in PR, people. You can tell the truth. And people would have responded just the same if she had shown that she was grieving. And then the next thing to do would be to focus on your family, make sure that your children were okay. Then, okay, if you want to look after the people that work for Charlie, spend some time with them. Spend some time with the nearest and dearest, the people who are affected the most. It's classic crisis, actually. When we do a crisis plan, we look first at the people who are most affected and we zone all the impetus on them. We make sure that every single action zones in on the most affected people, and that governs our prioritization when it comes to communicating out. The same thing happens when you're actually handling a crisis. You work with the most affected and you move that on in order, in priority. So the next thing she should have done is quietly deal with the Turning Point USA clients, donors, employees. Personally would be lovely, but if she didn't, people would understand it. And then finally, if they really did feel they needed some public statements, select a couple of good journalists. Okay, if you love Barry Weiss, sit with Barry Weiss, but do that in a really, really toned down way. But what she seemed to do was take advantage of all of the things that were in situ, all the plans that were in situ, because Charlie Kirk had a book tour planned and booked. So she just jumped on that and started doing all the book tour appearances. Well, you're talking weeks after your husband has died. It's just the most unbelievable scenario. And I don't think she had the right people around her to say, hang on a minute, is this the right thing for you to do? Is this the right thing for anybody to do? Would Charlie want you to be doing that? I don't think so. But they've seemed to have manufactured this situation where Charlie wanted his wife to be superwoman, take over the organization, make it even more powerful than it was before, because that's her stated objective, as she has said, 2 days after he died. And then now, where is she now? She's been fed to the wolves.
It certainly is a very, very interesting situation and a very, very interesting case study. We, as ever, would love to know what you think. What do you think could be next for Erika Kirk? What should Erika Kirk have done differently? Jackie has articulated brilliantly her opinions, but we would love to know what yours are, your comments make the podcast what it is. They keep the conversation going. So please do like, subscribe, comment wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Please do subscribe to our Substack as well, because these episodes are now out there on the Substack. They're going out there on our Substack. We're really delighted with that development. So please do like and subscribe on Substack as well. It's free. So go there. Great content going on that platform. Thank you so much for joining us on this, the latest episode of our wonderful pod where pop culture meets PR. From Jackie and from myself, take care of yourselves. It's bye for now.